sudden gladness to my eyes as soon as I had come from the dead vapor that had afflicted both my sight and heart. The beautiful planet that gives love comfort, veiling the fishes that came in her train, was shimmering all the east with laughter. I looked where dawn was vanquishing the grey breath of morning, and as it fled before her, I took far off the trembling of the sea. Though art again hardly parallels that mystic reach of nature, sì che di lontano conobbi il tremolar della marina. In music, that Italian half-century offers before Giovanni da Cascia 2 collections of monadic laude spirituale, songs of the penitentes. Curious that the earliest recorded, called 13th century, St. Lawrence, Martyr of Love, is rendered by Tinea, as with Byzantine and early Gothic affinities. While to the Gloria in Cielo, called about 1300, Max Miley gives a troubadour richness affined to the clarified passion of Giotto. Assisi was the crucible of the Giotto elixir. This upper church, vaulted by the mid-13th century, witnessed one of the great creative ferments of history. Cimabue was in charge. Artists came from all over Italy. Attributions remain in doubt. This Abraham and Isaac has been called Cimabue, Roman, Sienese, but no one could dispute the force with which Gothic penetrates the symbol world of Byzantine, wrenching it from the timeless to the enormous drama of time. In that circle of Cimabue, the painters of the rising generation were formed. It is likely that Duccio was there, and this Abraham and the Angels detail has been called his earliest work. As in his last, he stresses 2 elements of the alchemy, refining Gothic line in a solemnity of Byzantine. The third, classical revival, Cavallini may have brought from Rome. How consciously his Birth of the Virgin there has absorbed the quiet space of the antique. Unfortunately, his earlier works are lost, and nobody knows how this Trastevere mosaic of 1291 relates to the Assisi Esau and Isaac of the same time. This has been called Cavallini or school, and taken as a point of departure for Giotto. Others have been as certain that here the youthful Giotto opened the space Cavallini took back to Rome. Whatever the dates, such Roman geometry, where a servant girl as river goddess harmoniously pours into a classical urn, must have helped a Tuscan prodigy to what he required. The retrospective Cavallini at once yields robe, space, and gesture to what is surely here the genius of Giotto. In the melt of Byzantine, French, and classical, the Magister forms, as much or more than Giovanni Pisano, a cognate for Dante, cognate for the Ars Nova that would peak in Landini. In this face of the blind Isaac, the trans-realities of earth and spirit coruscate like that dawn on the shore of purgatory for which we had no parallel. In such light, Cato had just appeared, long his beard and streaked with white, and his hair the same, and the rays of the 4 holy stars glowed on his face as if the sun were before him. At Cato's direction, Dante goes to bathe his face, where dawn stills the morning breeze, and he knows far off the trembling of the sea. Giotto's masterpiece is the Arena Chapel in Padua, from the time of Dante's first banished wanderings. Like the Divine Comedy, it is a numbered Gothic synthesis, 3 within 3. Above, an empyrean of stars with gold medallion saints and Mary. Below, in monochrome, virtues and vices, allegorical powers of this world. Between, 3 rows of the coming. Christ's ancestry, his incarnation and life to the betrayal, his passion and resurrection to the descent of the Holy Spirit. On the end wall, opposite the altar, judgment turns time to eternity. Small scenes under justice and injustice carve their actuality in the life of man. The bad, as always, stronger, that raped Italy of Dante's Sordello, hostile of sorrows, aye, serve Italia di dolore ostello. In such a plan, the life of Christ requires its Old Testament correspondences. They occupy small windows between the large. Upper left, Moses strikes water from the rock, prototype of Cana, where Christ turns water into wine, while the creation of Adam looks to the next scene, not shown, of Lazarus raised from the dead. Below, Jonah into the whale marks Christ's death, the Lion of Judah breathing life into the cubs, his harrowing of hell. As in Dante, tragic energies are gripped in the theological frame. The 9th century stripped field of the blind world and faith in God did not give earth the dignity for tragic pain, even in the lament for Charlemagne. When Dante's fortune, beyond the intervention of human intelligence, turns her wheel and rejoices in bliss, we do not question, we accept. As Beatrice says, for our justice to appear injustice to mortal eyes is an argument of faith and not of heresy. But against that dark age resignation comes the surge of giant characters whose pride and pain are no longer to be chatted over with the rest of a universe of fallen vanity. This is the vortex in which Western tragedy is born, and it is born in Giovanni Pisano's pulpits, here from Pistoia, as in Dante, or in Giotto. It is born in Ars Nova, Guillaume de Machaut, though in germ, suspended in the bare fifths of resolving creed. Yet by that very suspension, The stripped pocket tragedies of Dante burn with fiercer outrage than Shakespeare, reaching for human containment, could afford. In the 33rd canto of Hell, Count Ugolino, gnawing the skull of Ruggiero, who had imprisoned him with his children, speaks. There is a narrow opening in the tower, called since we were there by hunger's name, in which it seems that other men must suffer. Through that crevice I had seen wax and wane more moons than few, before the veil of the future was rifted for me in a terrible dream. When I awoke in the dark before the dawn, I heard those of my sons who were with me there, crying out in their sleep, calling for bread. You are hard indeed if you do not shudder, seeing what I foresaw. If you cannot weep at this, how will you ever weep for another? We were all awake now, and the hour drew near at which our food was brought us by the jailer, and by his dream each was inclined to fear. And then I heard them nailing up the issue of the horrible tower, and without a word I sat and looked into my children's faces. I did not weep. No, I had turned to stone. They wept, and little Anselm said, "Father, why do you look so? What is it they have done?" And still that day and all the night following, I did not weep nor answer them at all, until the sun brought earth another dawning. Now when the first dull rays entered the gloom of that lamentable prison, and I, beholding, saw 4 faces the image of my own, I gnawed my hands for grief. And they, believing from this that I was driven by the wish of eating, suddenly raised themselves, speaking, "Father, believe our suffering would be less if you fed here. What you have put upon us you may strip off, this miserable flesh." I calmed myself not to give them more sadness. Through that day and another we sat mute. Earth, hard-hearted, why did you not open? When we had come to the 4th day, Gaddo spoke, and crying, "Father, why do you not help me?" he threw himself face downward at my feet. And there he died, and even as you see me, I saw them one by one fall down, all 3, the 5th day and the 6th, and over them I, already blind, confirming what I knew, groped 2 days calling the dead. Then finally, fasting did what anguish could not do. He turned his eyes in when this speech was done, and fastened his teeth again on the torn skull, that was strong as a dog's, ravening at the bone. Giotto's gaze of Christ, enfolded in the jealous robe, against that of Judas, a peak of concentration in all art. Would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? One can no more neglect in Dante the grip of the faith frame than the vast humanity released there. By that humanity, indeed, the frame itself is daringly transformed. 2 facades, 2 late Gothic containments, both centered about 1300. In the north, Strasbourg, the energized ascent of Erwin von Steinbach. Here, Siena, where Gothic went down into the sun-wreathed slopes of the south to elaborate as a conscious work of art its temporal relations. From those facade designs contrasting heads, a Strasbourg prophet, as if the medieval had gathered its new life for some pre-Lutheran warning. About 1300, the Strawberry Song, He vor do wir Kinder waren. Picking berries on that ground, we were marred with stains like wounds. A child walked deep in the grass. In fear we heard his cry of loss. Children, beware! The snake is here. He has bit our own playfair. That wound, they say, will never heal. He is accursed and will be still. Did you know 5 virgins delayed so long in the meadow where they played, that the bridegroom closed the hall? For all their plaint and call, the bailiff stripped them of their bright gowns, and left them naked to their wounds. From Siena, the Giovanni Pisano Simeon, where we began. So Dante humanized the way of salvation. It is from the great image of man in Crete that the stream of hell suffering flows, which, Felix culpa, the snake reared in the desert, the new Adam from the old, becomes the pilgrim's road to the highest good, in the flesh to see God, that ring of light which bears the image of a man. As Langland follows Dante, I never saw Christ in truth, but as myself in a mirror. There is the incarnate mystery. To be God and man is not to be half and half, but absolutely both, each validated by its opposite. So with the Dante of faith and reason, humility and daring. The venture of indwelling spirit, by which Virgil commands, with Joachim de Flores, be your own pope and king, is not impaired by the purging discipline at the summit of which it stands. Libero, dritto e sano è tuo arbitrio, perch'io te sovra te corono e mitrio. Your will now is upright, free and whole. I crown and mitre you, Lord of your own.